Most people think my job is boring. I spend my days studying the financial health of businesses, non-profit organizations, government agencies, and wealthy businessmen. I am a certified public accountant and lead a team that performs audits for several clients throughout the city. Typically, when the IRS starts breathing down a company's neck, we are called in and spend a few days to a few weeks sorting out their returns. Most of the time, it's pretty routine, but sometimes we find a surprise or two. Today, I received the biggest surprise of my life, but the audit we did had nothing to do with it. It's all about what I saw outside the window. For the past 3 weeks, my small team and I have been holed up in the offices of Landmass Development Group, analyzing perhaps the worst accounting system I have ever seen. Landmass invited us because they are being investigated by the government's Office of Inspector General for contract misuse and invoicing fraud on a number of road and bridge projects. This is the second time the state has accused them of financial impropriety, and the second time we have audited their accounts to pull them out of the fire. However, this time I am not sure that I can perform the miracles they expect. My team consists of three of the best computer scientists I've ever worked with. Red is the informal leader of the group, with Ian and Jackie sometimes taking the lead. What they can do with computers is amazing, and they can find the proverbial needle in a haystack, no matter the size. We carefully study the entire landmass database and compare each transaction with internal company documents. My three techies, as they call themselves, will find any suspicious or inconsistent data. I also have two of the most tenacious accountants in the industry on my team, Adriana and Mandy. Both treat clients' files as if they were their own children and consider them their property. Most of the time they are affable and friendly, but if the situation demands, they can be unbearably tough. You shouldn't lie to them or try to hide something, much less talk down to them. But the worst thing you can do is try to flirt with them. Both are married with wonderful families, and anyone who thinks they might jeopardize that could end up on the floor staring at the ceiling. I ask them not to break their arms and legs when a slap in the face can do, but I will support them in any case. All five of my team members have earned my respect dozens of times over for their work ethic and dedication. I expect them to clean up the landmass mess quickly. So what do? I manage the work, interact with the client, and write the final inspection report. Yes, you're right. I sit in my seat, pretending to be busy while my team does all the hard work. I put everything together at the end and tell the client the bad news. I estimated that the landmass audit would take about 3 weeks. During our stay, we were given luxurious offices, each with windows overlooking the city, all the computer equipment we requested, and even two secretaries to run our errands. We even had our own coffee maker. I guess landmass management felt they needed to be extra nice to us, so they gave us the best of everything. My office was at one end of the corridor on the 21st floor, and the others' offices were at the other end. I got the office of one of the managing partners, who is on long-term medical leave. It looked like a 1930s movie set. Dark wood paneling everywhere, luxurious carpets, shelves of classic books, a giant antique globe, awards, posters and trophies, a huge antique brass telescope, even a huge stuffed marlin fish. The mahogany desk, Edwardian chairs, and leather sofa were reminiscent of the Oval Office at the White House. This was all clearly too much. I got a sense of what landmass management was spending their money on. During one of my periods of inactivity, my mind began to wander. I leaned back in my chair and began to look out the window. Across the street was another one of those huge chrome and glass high-rise buildings that filled the business district. From behind my desk, I couldn't see the people in their offices. The glass had a shimmering surface that reflected sunlight. I thought that if I couldn't see them, then they couldn't see me. I smiled. I smiled because I just realized that right across the street are the Enterprise Research and Development offices. My wife Cheryl works at Enterprise as Executive Director of Sales. I visited her office several times and met most of her colleagues. Most of them were quite decent people, but there were also some who I didn't like very much. But it was not I who had to work with them, but Cheryl. Cheryl's office is on the 20th floor and slightly to the left of my window. I got up and went to the window to try to find her office. It took a few minutes to figure out which windows were hers, but even when I found them, I couldn't see what was going on behind the glass. Then I looked to my right and saw that I was standing next to a giant brass telescope. I walked to the door, closed it, and returned to the telescope. I fiddled with the settings for a couple of minutes until I focused on it and found Cheryl's office. Now I could see her completely clearly. I looked at the front of the device and noticed a bluish filter that I assumed acted as a polarizer, like those sunglasses that cut out glare on the beach on a sunny day. To the naked eye, the building's windows looked like shimmering golden mirrors. Through a telescope with a polarizing filter attached, they appeared to be just transparent glass. I looked through the telescope again and saw my lover sitting at her desk, looking at her computer monitor. In front of me was the most beautiful woman with golden hair that I had ever held in my arms, the love of my life for the past 9 years. After a few more adjustments to the vintage telescope, I was able to zoom in so much that I could almost read the words on her screen. I smiled again, thinking how much industrial espionage could be accomplished just by spying on someone at work. Maybe this is how landmass outperformed its competitors. I'll have to mention this to my team and see what they think, although it's unlikely that we can do anything about it. I zoomed out again so that Cheryl's office windows could fit completely within the telescope and continued to watch her work. My mind began to wander, drifting to other places and times. I thought about Cheryl. I saw her clearly in my mind. I saw her standing next to our bed at home and smiling at me with her wide, beautiful smile. I could clearly see her slowly taking off her long black silk negligee, the same one I bought for her when we were in Paris last year. I saw her moving to the edge of the bed, wearing only black panties and black stockings, and smiling at me, her blonde hair falling over her shoulders like the snow caps on the peaks of the Rocky Mountains, framing her magnificent breasts. I called her breasts Big Tetons and loved watching them bounce when she walked around the house in one of my t-shirts. I loved everything about Cheryl. There was nothing in her body that didn't seem perfect to me. Her sparkling blue eyes were perfect, her soft, fair skin was perfect, her legs, butt, breasts, stomach, toes. Everything about Cheryl's body was perfect, and everything inside her body was just as perfect. She was smart, funny, caring, honest, and most importantly, she loved me. But it seemed to me that I loved her more. I stood watching my wife work. God, how I loved this woman. Then the phone rang, bringing me back to the boring reality of the landmass audit. I panicked for a moment, thinking about my condition, but knew that no one would see me on the phone. Hello? Hey, boss, Mandy said. Would you like to join us for lunch? Red found a little cafe across the street that might just become our new favorite spot. How about this? Thanks, Mandy, but I have a few calls to make. If you could get me a sandwich and a soda, I'd appreciate it. Tuna with salad is fine. Maybe tomorrow. Okay, just don't forget to come for air sometimes and go home on time. Don't worry. Thank you, Mandy. Looking back at my temporary desk, I saw that none of this required immediate attention and decided to return to the telescope to look at my beautiful wife again and fantasize about pleasant moments. But this time I saw that she was not alone. Standing at the edge of her desk was a man I recognized from the Christmas party. His name was Brad or something like that. He was one of those people I didn't particularly like. I felt like he was spending too much time with Cheryl than I was willing to accept. Cheryl simply brushed it off, saying that it was one of her bosses and that she needed to be nice to him if she ever wanted to advance in her career. I didn't like it, but I didn't think about it anymore. I watched it for a long time. Nothing suspicious, just Cheryl talking to her boss. Everything looked like normal work matters, so I didn't think anything of it. The man stood up as if about to leave. Cheryl sat back in her chair, and the man returned. I thought he was leaving, but obviously he wasn't. He just closed the door to Cheryl's office, pulled a chair towards her desk, and sat down. They were sitting next to each other at her desk when Cheryl put her feet on his lap. She took off her shoes. Her bare feet in stockings lay on his lap. "Damn it, what's going on here?" I muttered out loud. I almost exploded with anger. I pulled away from the telescope and began to nervously pace around the room. I didn't know what to do. My mind seemed to have shut down, but my heart was beating so fast that it felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. Finally, I saw my cell phone on the table and grabbed it. I returned to the telescope. They had sex. My heart ached as if it might explode. I pressed the call button for Cheryl's office on my cell phone. Cheryl's head turned towards the phone, and I saw her reach out to answer the call. "Hello, darling," she said in a soft, loving voice. "What a pleasant surprise. What's happened?" For a moment, I was speechless. I stood there, talking to my wife on the phone, while watching through a telescope as she cheated on me. There was no hint in her voice of what was happening. "Darling, is everything okay?" she asked when I couldn't get a word out. I, I, I just called to tell you how much I love you," I finally managed to say. "Oh, that's so sweet," she said tenderly. "I love you too." "Yes, I was sitting here, looking out the window and thinking how much I miss you. I can't wait to be in your arms again tonight." "Oh, honey, that's so sweet. I can't wait to meet you too. But now I'm a little busy. Can I call you back after lunch?" "Sure, go back to what you were doing and call me back when you're done. Enjoy." Bye. I watched as she put the phone down, and then she did something I never expected in my life. She raised her middle finger and pointed it at the phone. She told the phone to go to hell and me along with it. My heart stopped. My world collapsed. I fell to the floor, or so I thought, because when I opened my eyes again, Mandy was standing next to me, looking at me with a worried expression on her face. "Boss, what happened?" she asked anxiously. "Adriana already called an ambulance." "What's happening?" "I don't know," I muttered. "I think I lost consciousness." I don't." "Lie still and relax," she interrupted. "The doctors will arrive soon." I closed my eyes, and the image of Cheryl giving the middle finger to the phone reappeared in my mind. I started crying. I felt Mandy's hands holding mine, but I still cried. I couldn't stop. After a while, I heard noise at the door and conversations. When I opened my eyes again, the lifeguard was standing in front of me. He placed a blood pressure cuff on my arm and pressed a button. He then listened to my heartbeat and put an oxygen mask on me. He performed several more procedures that I only saw on TV. "Hello, Mr. Hughes, can you tell me what happened?" asked the fireman. I was just looking out the window, and everything suddenly went dark. "Have you experienced any stress or something like that? Your blood pressure is very high." "Well, yes, no. I. How do you feel now?" I couldn't tell him I wanted to die, so I lied. "Everything is fine. I think I should take my doctor's advice and start taking those blood pressure pills. Sir, if you can sit down, I will take your blood pressure again." I sat down. It was still high. After a couple of minutes, they helped me move onto the sofa. I told the doctor that I didn't want to go to the hospital. He measured the pressure again. It had dropped, but still remained above normal. "Sir, do you think you are feeling better now?" "I think yes. Thank you for coming. I'll call my doctor and tell him what happened. Thanks for your help." When they left, I stayed on the couch and Mandy continued to hold my hand. I tried to put on a brave face and smiled a little at her. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked. "Don't know. Looks like I'll take the rest of the day off." "Don't think." An authoritative voice came from the other end of the room. I never dared to argue with him. Adriana stood by the window with her hands on her hips and looked at me sternly. "You're not going anywhere until you tell us the truth. We're your friends, Marty. Come on, lay it out." Red, Ian, and Jackie stood around my table with worried and a little puzzled faces that Adriana was talking to me like that. Nothing happened. I just lost consciousness, that's all. Fucking crap, Marty," Adriana screamed. Then she slowly raised her hand and pointed at the telescope. "What did you see?" All the grief came flooding back. I started to choke. "Marty, calm down," Mandy whispered quietly in my ear. "Whatever it is, we are all here for you. Everything will be fine." "No, it won't," I muttered. I started to get emotional again, but I tried my best to hold it in. I started to tremble, and then I felt a hug. Adriana joined Mandy on the couch. trying to support me and somehow piece my shattered world back together. I just sat there shaking and looking at the floor. Red, get some ice and bottles of water, maybe some soda, Adriana ordered. Ian, hang the meeting sign on the door. Jackie, bring some chairs. We will have a team meeting. A few minutes later, with the door closed, my team and I were sitting in a circle, with me on one side of the couch and Adriana and Mandy still holding my hands. Mandy gave me cold water. Adriana leaned forward and turned my head towards her, looking into my eyes. She spoke in a soft tone, as one would speak to a child. Okay, Marty, now without any nonsense. What did you see? I burst into tears. I laid it all out, leaving out not a single nasty detail. When I finished, I was ready to cry again, but I no longer had the strength to do so. I just sat on the couch, looking at my hands and thinking about my ruined life. What are you going to do, Marty? Adriana asked in that same soft, motherly voice. I thought for a long time. I loved Cheryl with all my heart, with all my being. I didn't want to lose her because if I lost her, I would die. But what I saw through the telescope changed everything. Everything I thought about Cheryl and our life together, especially about our marriage, was now in doubt. All past experiences were crossed out. I knew what I saw, and it hurt. But what did it all mean? What's happening? I couldn't figure out what to do until I knew everything completely. I looked around my team, my friends, and began to say, Guys, I have a problem, a serious problem, but I don't want to involve you in it. You can shove this somewhere else, Marty, Jackie interrupted me. My little geek girl with emo looks looked at me with her dark eyes. I've never been a fan of piercings or tattoos, but Jackie has proven to me time and time again that despite her arms covered in designs of snakes and dragons, 12 earrings, a diamond nose stud, a gold eyebrow ring, and a gold barbell in her tongue, and who knows how many more hidden decorations, she was the most sensible and caring person I have ever met. I sat there, stunned, because in all the time I knew her, she had never said anything stronger than the word damn. Marty, Jackie said, looking me straight in the eyes, we are a team, and more than that, we are friends. Friends don't abandon friends in trouble. We will help you. Whatever you decide to do, we will do it, just without killing. Mandy turned to me and said, She's right, Marty. Now you feel pain. You may feel like you want to die, but one thing I know for sure is that as long as you have friends, you have hope. You can handle it. Whatever you decide, we will be with you every step of the way. We will help you. You just need to lead us like you always do. Tell us what you want, and we will make it happen. The room filled with silence as I thought about what I wanted. The most important thing I needed right now was to find out how badly my marriage had suffered. I needed to know everything Cheryl was hiding from me, and then I can make a decision about the future path. Until then, I had to live with the destructive images that my imagination painted in my head. But the image of Cheryl giving me the middle finger was devastating in itself. I have to find out, I said finally. I need to know everything, who she was with, how long it lasted, how many times, what she did, everything. But the biggest question, the one I'll probably never get an answer to, is why? Why did she do this to me? What have I done wrong? Maybe there's something I can't give her. Don't start blaming yourself, Adriana said. You don't know if you're to blame for something. But having known you all these years, I can say that you were the perfect gentleman and friend. I don't know what's going on, but I swear to God we'll get to the bottom of this. And if everything doesn't turn out the way you hope, then you'll still have us, and we'll help you get through it. We will always be here for you, Marty. Guys, we need to make a plan, Mandy told the group. Red, Ian, and Jackie, you three think about how you can find out something where she works. She does everything at work, so we need more information on that side. Adriana and I will try to figure out how to find out what's going on outside of work. We'll think about it and meet again at 4. Marty, you go to my office and lie on the couch. I want you to relax. I don't want you to go near this telescope again today. You've already seen enough. I'll send someone to keep an eye on what's going on. I went to Mandy's office and lay down on the sofa. All I could think about was Cheryl with that man. What stood out most before my eyes was her gesture with her middle finger raised towards the phone, and in fact, towards me. At 4 o'clock, Jan looked into the room and said that everyone had already gathered in my office. I've always liked Jan. She was a little reserved, but when she said something, everyone listened. Despite her 24 years, she had an aura of maturity that seemed beyond her age. Her Asian heritage gave her an air of mystery and made her both attractive and unapproachable. Her intelligence was so high that it seemed beyond measurement. She took my hand and led me down the corridor. Once everyone was back in their seats, Adriana led the meeting and began taking notes. It seemed strange to me that she was writing down our plan to invade my wife's privacy to reveal her secret side, but I said nothing. Basically, everyone was talking to each other, and I just sat and listened. When the meeting was over and the plan was formulated, everyone went to perform their tasks, just like any other audit we've ever done. My role was the same: sit, look busy, and pay for the necessary materials. "Marty, can you go home today?" Mandy asked. "I don't think I can look her in the eyes," I muttered, covering my face with my hands. "I think I'll stay here until she goes to bed, and then I'll sneak home. I hope I don't have to talk to her today. I can't trust myself. I might say something that I wouldn't want to say." "Can you go on a business trip?" she asked. "Perhaps we need to think about it. I don't want to be around her on the weekends, so I need to figure out a way to get out of this. Maybe I'll say that my father had an accident. I'll think of something and let you know. If you need somewhere to stay for a few days, you can stay with me. We have a guest room. I'll tell Aaron and the kids to be ready for you to possibly arrive." I sat for a long time, staring through the telescope aimed at the empty office. Everything that was happening in my head played over and over again like a movie, giving me the opportunity to experience this pain again and again. I left the office after 9 in the evening and took a roundabout route home, arriving only around 10. Luckily, Cheryl was already asleep. I quietly gathered my clothes for tomorrow and the weekend and took a shower. Cheryl didn't move. I think she's tired after all the events at the office today. I went to the guest bedroom and covered my head. I was up before dawn and left before Cheryl woke up. I couldn't face her knowing what I knew. I just needed to figure out how to survive. I arrived at the landmass office before everyone else and set the coffee to brew. Returning to my office, I looked at the telescope as if it were a demon. I was afraid to approach him. Around 9, I walked down the corridor to see what my colleagues were doing. Jan was sitting at her computer, doing something I didn't understand. When I looked into her office, she smiled at me. "Where is everyone?" I asked. "They're getting ready," she said with a smile, turning back to the monitor. Unperturbed as always, I thought, returning to my desk. Around 10 in the morning, Red entered the office, pushing several large boxes on a cart. I watched as he went about his business without a word. Red is a walking contradiction. If you looked at him, you would see a tall, red-haired, skinny guy with old-fashioned glasses. He looked like a stereotypical nerd and often wore Star Trek t-shirts and an Indiana Jones-style hat. But outside the office, he was a completely different person. They said that he was interested in rock climbing and dreamed of one day conquering Everest. He also rode around the area on his 2-year-old Ducati motorcycle. Red may look like a nerd, but he's an adventurer at heart. When he noticed me, he waved and continued unpacking the equipment. It turned out that it was another telescope, but more modern. Instead of looking through the eyepiece, the image was displayed on the monitor. The resolution was much better. When he pointed the telescope at Cheryl's computer, I was able to clearly read everything on the screen. She was working on email. Nothing important, just enterprise business. Without taking his eyes off the monitor, Red spoke. "Once Ian finishes his part, we won't have to look out the window anymore to see what's going on your wife's computer. By lunchtime, we will have full control of their server network and will have access to all the computers in their office. We will be able to intercept all incoming and outgoing traffic. By the way, you may not know, but Ian is one of the best hackers UCLA has ever produced." Red proceeded to set up another computer with a giant 60-inch monitor. He didn't say what the big screen was for, but I had my suspicions. Before he left, He placed a big red button on my desk and smiled. "Press it," he said. When I did this, all the computer screens in the room switched to charts and tables displaying landmass computer and accounting systems. If someone comes in who shouldn't know what we're doing, like landmass management, just press this button and everything will switch to what you see now. It's like a screensaver, but with landmass data. This is all nonsense, but it will look like we are actually doing the auditing as we should. He smiled and left. Adriana and Mandy arrived shortly before lunch and sat down at the computer with the telescope. They set it up, and now we had a clear view of Cheryl's office on the screen. A few minutes later, a man entered the office. This was not the same person as yesterday. This one was older, with gray hair and a decent paunch. I just stared at the screen, hoping he wasn't here for a foot massage. "Marty, I think you'd better come down to my office for a while," Mandy said with concern in her voice. "You might not want to watch if something like yesterday starts. I don't want your blood pressure to go through the roof again." I silently got up and left the room. An hour later, Mandy came into the room and sat next to me at the computer where I was playing blackjack. She hugged my chest and laid her head on my shoulder. I felt that she was in pain. "Mandy, I don't want to know, but at the same time I need to know. Did something happen?" Mandy nodded her head, clinging to me. My heart began to speed up and the pain returned, but I needed to know. "What?" I asked quietly. She sobbed, sat up, and looked at me. I could see that she was having a hard time making eye contact with me. Another sob, and quietly she said, "She pleased him." These words sounded like a hammer blow to the chest. One word, and I became a trembling mass again. One simple damn word. "Marty, we recorded everything. Red has everything set up to record what's going on in case you need it, maybe for a lawyer. I advise you not to watch the recording. This will cause you more pain. Let me take you to get something to drink." Mandy took me by the hand and led me back to my office, which now looked more like a modern headquarters than a 1930s mausoleum. The 60-inch monitor now displayed dozens of small screens showing hallways, offices, entrances, and other areas. "These are the security cameras from the 20th to 24th floors opposite," Yong said, approaching me. "We can see almost everything that goes on in their offices, with the exception of the bathrooms and some of the senior managers' offices. We can control this monitor, zoom in from any camera, or view multiple cameras at the same time. We can record everything or only selected cameras. Pretty cool, right?" Yes," I answered, not knowing what else to say. "Come here, boss, look at this," Red said from across the room. I walked over and stood behind him. He sat with his arms crossed and smiling. "You look at your wife working at her computer. This is mirrored access to her system, and when her computer is turned on, we see everything she does. Right now, she's writing a letter to someone about the cost of microchips for their robotic arms. Nothing special. While we're watching this, I download all of her emails sent and received over the last 5 years. She synced her calendar with her phone, and I copied it too, just in case. We can do the same thing with any computer they have. Their security system is complete crap." I returned to my desk and sat down, not knowing what to do next. A few minutes later, my cell phone rang. "Hush, everyone, hush," Red shouted. "Pick up the phone, boss." "Hello?" I answered. "Hi, honey, it's me," Cheryl said. I immediately returned to the telescope monitor and saw Cheryl sitting at her desk, holding her phone in her hand. She was alone. "Hello, what happened? You worked late yesterday. I couldn't snuggle up to you in bed. I just called to say how much I missed you. Will you be staying late again today?" I couldn't look her in the eyes or talk to her directly, not knowing how to deal with what I had learned. I knew I would have to lie to her, just like she lied to me. Most likely, yes. This audit is a real headache. We have a very tight deadline, and we will have to work hard to make it on time. Everyone here gives their all, and by the way, my father called me. He's having problems with his plumbing again. It looks like I'll have to go to him this weekend and clean out the pipes. Sorry. Well, I was hoping for some time alone with you tonight. I bought a new dress last weekend and wanted to please you. I was going to dress up in this for the weekend and let you be the first to undress me. It is completely to your taste. Transparent, but at first glance it seems to be a simple black dress, short and with a deep neckline down to the navel. It unfastens with one finger movement and falls to your feet. I also have matching black panties from Victoria's Secret. Well, your mistake. Maybe next weekend. Sounds amazing. Sorry, I'll miss this. Maybe next weekend we can come up with something and spend time together. Absolutely not. This is not something I would wear in public. This is just for you, for your eyes. Okay, I understand. You know what? Why don't you book a room at the Hyatt next weekend? We can relax in the spa and have dinner at the Sorbonne. And then I will unpack my gift. Ooh, that sounds wonderful. I'll see if I can book a deluxe room. I read an article in a magazine. I want to try something in the hot tub. Talking about trickles of water sounds tempting. I'm looking forward to it. I'll finish everything by Friday and call you from Dad to let you know when I'm home. Okay, it's a deal. Love you. Bye. Bye, I said and hung up, unable to say, I love you in response. I watched as she put the phone back, but this time she didn't give him the middle finger. I wondered what changed in this call, and then I realized she wasn't with anyone else. She wasn't having sex with another man. What did all this mean? Ta-da! Jackie walked through the door with her arms raised in the air as if she had just scored the winning goal at the Super Bowl. Someone raised the second bank of cameras. Catch it, boss. She threw something at me and I instinctively caught it. These were my keys. What are you doing with my keys? I asked. I just finished installing cameras in your house. Now everything that happens there will be recorded here. She pointed to the monitor that showed my kitchen. Now there are cameras in every room of your house, including the bathroom. Cool, right? Yes, cool, I answered sadly. Everyone worked on different computers all day. I hoped they were at least partly auditing. One by one, they said goodbye to me and left the office. Mandy was the last to leave. Listen, Marty, go out and eat something, she said, standing in front of my table. Try not to drink too much, but do your best to take your mind off it all. Maybe go to the movies. Tomorrow is Friday. I will come early to finish my part of the audit. Go away for the weekend. Think about everything. We will all meet on Monday and discuss everything. Just remember that you are not alone. You have friends. Good night. When she left, I was left thinking. I considered all possible options. I even made a list on paper possible options for how to solve the situation, with the pros and cons of each. I wanted to approach this like any other audit, but the emotional burden was too great. In the end, I left the paper on the table and left. I returned home at midnight. I took Mandy's advice and had a nice dinner, but the dinner money was a waste. I never got to finish the whole steak. When I got home, Cheryl was already asleep, so I packed my clothes for Friday and the weekend, showered quietly, and went back to sleep in the guest room. I left the house again before Cheryl woke up. Avoiding the woman who was everything to me for so many years was hard, both physically and emotionally. I looked at the telescope and saw Cheryl walking into her office. She had her usual coffee and bagel, and the first thing she did was look at her schedule for the day. I could clearly see that it was marked all 4 for noon. I had no idea what this could mean, but I knew it was nothing good. She'd been having sex with one of her co-workers during lunch for the past 2 days, so whatever all 4 of us meant, it was likely the beginning of the end of my marriage. Today, I decided that, despite the pain, I will see what happens, even if my team is against it. I gathered the team for a small meeting as the last of them arrived. Guys, I need to discuss something with you, I began. I can't take it anymore, so I made a couple of decisions. Decisions are what I do here, so I have to earn my paycheck somehow. Firstly, no matter what happens there, I will sit at the monitor and watch. I'd rather be alone because I might not take it well, but I also don't want you to call an ambulance for me again. So decide which one of you will sit next to me and keep an eye on me during lunch. Secondly, this weekend I will collect my thoughts and decide what to do next. Things aren't looking great for me and Cheryl right now, but I don't know exactly what I want to do yet. Whatever it is, I might need your help. You yourself offered your help, so I will accept it. But if things go wrong, I want you to be as far away from me as possible. I will not let you suffer because of the destruction of my marriage. This is not discussed, so it will be. Third, I want the audit to be completed by next Friday, and for all this equipment to be removed. Everyone returned to their seats and left me alone. From time to time, I glanced at the monitor to see what Cheryl was doing. The closer it got to noon, the more stressed I became. When I looked again around 11:30, she was no longer there. "Marty, I'll be your babysitter," Mandy said, closing the door and turning the key. "Everyone wanted to be with you, but I turned out to be the most persistent. Everyone supports you even though they can't be here." I felt a little better because there were people around who were ready to help, even if I felt alone. I hope if they ever find themselves in a similar situation, I can be just as good a friend to them. I looked at the monitor, noticing movement, and saw Cheryl return to the office. But now she was in a different outfit. She was wearing the same short black dress that she had described to me on the phone the day before. And she was right, it looked stunning. It was something I would never want her to wear in public. Her long blonde hair fell over her shoulders, hiding the top of her dress, which was held on her body only by laces around her neck. The neckline was so deep that it reached her navel, and two strips of fabric barely covered her breasts, leaving the inner and outer parts visible. The dress was so short that it barely reached mid-thigh, and the sheer fabric showed the outline of the black Victoria's Secret thong she mentioned. She said this outfit was for me, but she lied. She put it on for someone else. Mandy squeezed my hand. I felt her tremble as we sat and watched Cheryl fix her makeup and brush her hair, waiting for someone. But who? Who was going to be her new lover? All my thoughts were cut short when I saw Cheryl turn towards the office door. Now we could only see her back, but it was clear from her movements that she liked what she saw. She spread her arms, welcoming her lover. And then I saw how she hugged one of the men, the same one who was with her a few days ago, and kissed him passionately. Then another man came in, and when Cheryl finished kissing the first one, she put her arms around the second man's neck and kissed him. Then a third appeared, waiting his turn in her arms, and the fourth. Now I understood what the words "all four" meant in her schedule. I sat there watching my wife and the woman I loved make out with four of her co-workers. The one with gray hair and a belly was with her yesterday, Mandy whispered quietly. I didn't see them together, but just one word she said popped up in my head again and filled me with pain. A simple word for the act of sex, something Cheryl had done for me thousands of times. But now this word has become part of the process of destroying my marriage. We continued to watch. Four men stood around Cheryl, talking about something and laughing. Cheryl flirted with them, touching their arms or chests, enjoying their attention. And her retinue enjoyed her. Then the men sat down, two on the sofa against the wall, two in the chairs opposite her table. They all turned slightly to see Cheryl, who was now standing in the corner next to the window. We could see everyone clearly through the telescope. Cheryl began to sway. She moved to music I couldn't hear. Cheryl is a good dancer, and this isn't the first time I've seen her dance solo. She did this for me. I watched as she danced around the room and in front of every member of her audience. She leaned over, swayed, and ran her fingers over the men's shoulders, walking close to them. Watching her move usually delighted me, but watching her now, in front of an audience of her colleagues, had the opposite effect. Slowly she swayed until she was back in the corner she started from. Her smile was radiant. It almost knocked the life out of me. The four men applauded, and her dance ended. I watched as she slowly walked over to the table and stood next to it, looking sensually over her shoulder. Then the sex began. I turned away from the screen and looked out the window. I needed a break. My reality needed rest. Mandy patted my back and whispered, "It's okay. This will end soon." I felt Mandy's hands on my shoulders. When I turned to look at her, she had turned away from the monitor and was crying. She cried for me. I looked back at the screen and saw Cheryl bend over to pick up her dress. The men put their pants back on and headed for the door. Cheryl took a long sip of the soda on the table, tilted her head back to gargle, and then swallowed. She then opened a desk drawer, pulled out a towel, and walked around the desk and out of camera range. When she returned, she was dressed in her usual business suit and stuffed her little black dress into her bag. 5 minutes later, she was back on her computer and scrolling through her email as if nothing had happened. But something happened. Our marriage is dead. My heart was beating fast, but not fast enough to raise my blood pressure through the roof. I was surprisingly calm. Perhaps I already knew what I was going to do. I heard Mandy's quiet sobs on my shoulder again. "It's all because of Mandy," I said quietly. She sat up and looked at the monitor and then at me. "How are you?" she asked. "Not too good, but a hell of a lot better than that day. I'm completely numb now. I think I'm going to have a pretty bad weekend once this all sinks in." "What can I do?" "I don't know. I'm definitely not going home. I'll drive up to my father and talk to him. He always had a fairly rational view of things. Maybe he can give me some advice." "Well, remember, I'm here for you, just like the rest of us. Just ask." "Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate it. And if I don't tell anyone anything today, thank them for me too." "I will do so." Mandy left me alone with my thoughts. A few minutes later, Red entered the room and sat down at one of the computers. He didn't look at me. Mandy must have told him what happened. Half an hour later, 4 photographs appeared on a large 60-inch monitor. Below them was the organizational structure of the Enterprise Research and Development Corporation. "I thought you might be interested to know. These are the 4. They are all your wife's immediate superiors. They are 2 levels below top management and directly control its work. I have their personal files if you need it. In another hour, I will know everything about them. Finances, families, everything. I will put all the information in a file on your computer." I didn't say a word. Red continued to work in silence while I sat looking at the faces of the 4 men who had slept with my wife. But I can't blame them. Any sane man would want to have sex with Cheryl. Everyone except me. I was no longer sane. Audrina was the last one to leave, but not before stopping to check on me. She knew the details of Cheryl's lunch session and gently wished me a good weekend. When I was alone again, the pain intensified. Tears flowed out of their eyes and fell onto the table. I needed to go away and think. I looked at the telescope screen and saw Cheryl packing up her things at her workstation. The dress in its case hung on her chair, and she put the towel she used to dry herself in a plastic bag. I picked up the phone and called home, leaving Cheryl a message that I was going to my dad's for the weekend. Then I called my dad and asked if he wanted a guest for the weekend. I don't know how, but he sensed that something was wrong and told me to come. 15 minutes later, I was on the road. I walked into the offices of the Landmass Development Group on Monday morning with more energy and purpose than I had in the past few days. My father is a wise man, and he helped me figure out what I want. He didn't tell me what to do. He simply helped me find my way in the ocean in which I was drowning. I made a decision. I knew what was going to happen. Now I needed my team to help make it all happen. Jackie came up to me while I was making coffee and looked at me. "Are you okay, boss?" she asked, her black eyes burning right through me. "In order. Thank you for asking." Without saying a word, she hugged me tightly. I felt the rings and spikes on her ear cutting into my chest. I didn't say anything. I was just enjoying the moment. "Am I in the way?" Jan said from the doorway. We pulled away from each other, looking embarrassed and guilty. We smiled at the little Asian girl, and she responded with her dazzling smile. As I passed by, she took my hand and walked me to my office. When Red showed up, I asked him to gather everyone. I wanted to arrange a war council. His smile stretched from ear to ear. Everyone gathered in my office again. There was a sign on the door that said, "At a meeting." "Guys, I made a decision. In fact, my father helped me a lot. Basically, here's what I'm going to do. Today, I will meet with a lawyer and begin the divorce process. Once the papers are ready, I'll send them to Cheryl's office for lunch. hoping the courier will interrupt one of her meetings. Then I will call her and tell her that I have been watching her actions all this time. I will give her a choice, either me or her lovers. If she chooses me, she will need to do three things. File a sexual harassment lawsuit, naming 4 of her bosses and company management. She should quit. And finally, I will ask her to explain why she did this to me. If she does everything I ask without delay, I will put the divorce on hold and see if we can work things out. I'm not sure I can forgive it after what I saw, but I'll give it a chance. If she does not fulfill any of these 3 conditions, then I will send short videos of her actions to everyone at Enterprise Research and Development. I will also send the video to the wives of her 4 bosses and offer the raw recordings. I know it's vindictive, but I need to do something to make those men feel at least some of the pain that I feel. Maybe revenge is wrong, but right now I don't care. Now you need to get all this spy equipment out of here and out of my house and out of their systems. I don't want any evidence of our interference to remain. Collect everything and send it out by the end of the day. Pack everything that concerns Cheryl separately and give it to Adriana for safekeeping. Make copies, but don't leave anything that could fool you. But before I put everything away, I need help preparing letters, if it comes to that. Red, can you help? Everything is ready, boss. I will set it up on your computer so that it will be untraceable. With one click of a button, the building across the street will collapse when everyone sees the video. Let's not be dramatic, Red, I said with a smile. I just want a precise nuclear strike and hope I don't have to use it. Boss, Red said with obvious uncertainty. I think I have a little more information about what's going on there. Do you want to find out now, or is it better in private? Say, everyone here already knows everything, so a little more information won't change the picture. Continue. I'm pretty sure I know when it all started and why. I looked through your wife's emails over the past year and found one that says she is in the running for a major promotion when an executive retires this spring. This letter is from one of her bosses, Brad Paxton. When I looked at her calendar for the days following this letter, I saw Paxton's name on the schedule for lunch every Wednesday. Boss, I think she's sleeping with her boss to ensure she gets a promotion. Looks like it started in October. In December, the name of another manager, that fat old man, appears on her Thursday lunch schedule. I'm just guessing, but I think he found out what they were doing and threatened to tell everyone if he wasn't included in the game. I found an email from him with a thinly veiled threat to this effect. And in January, the name of the 3rd manager appears in the schedule on Tuesdays and the 4th from April on Mondays. Once a month, she brings them all together on Friday, as you saw last week. She doesn't seem to date other managers or co-workers, just these 4. Her weekly lunch schedule is now fully booked, and no other executives are available. I have copied all the important emails to your computer along with her calendar. Oh, and you should know, nothing happened at home over the weekend. She spent a quiet couple of days relaxing, reading, taking a long bath, and sunbathing. It looks like she only has fun at work. I thought you should know. Thanks, Red, I said, trying to connect the new details with what I already knew. I appreciate your diligence, and so do you all. I am also grateful for having you by my side and for your friendship. I will never forget this. Everyone gave me the best gift. They smiled at me. I looked at my friends and also smiled back. Okay, team, let's get to work. And I want all the landmass audit materials on my desk by 5 in the evening. Oh, and one more thing. I'm going home this afternoon to get some things. I need someone to watch the house across the street and call if she comes out. I'll let you know where I'll live as soon as I'm settled. No, Mandy and Adriana said at the same time. Mandy frowned, turned to Adriana, pointed a finger at her, and said, No, I already told you, Marty, that you can stay in our guest room. I even changed the bed linen there. As soon as you take what you need from home, you will live with us. Don't argue with me. So it will be. Okay, I know when not to argue. I'll call when I'm done and ask for the address. The meeting ended and everyone left. Red sat down at the computer to set up my nuclear email. Ian and Jackie began to dismantle and pack up the equipment in the room, leaving only the telescope and computer monitor. We'll still need them when everything goes down. Mandy and Adriana went to another office to collect all the landmass paperwork. I'm afraid our original prediction was correct. We won't be able to pull landmass out of the fire this time. I found a divorce lawyer near our home and made an appointment for that day. At lunchtime, Adriana came up to me in Ian's office and handed me my cell phone. I didn't really want to be near the telescope monitor during lunch. I've already seen enough. Marty, call Cheryl. We need you to call and see if she acts the same as last time after you hang up. We need to videotape this. Sadly, I picked up the phone and dialed her number at my workplace. When she answered, her voice was hesitant, as if she had just run to get to the phone. But I knew that wasn't the case. I didn't need to see it. My imagination itself painted quite painful pictures. When we hung up, I looked at Adriana, who was standing at the doorway, looking down the hallway. She waved her hand towards my office and then turned to me. "Thanks, boss, we got it all down," she said. "Is she?" I asked timidly. Adriana simply nodded and left. On Monday and Tuesday, I stayed late at work and successfully avoided seeing Cheryl at home. Wednesday, 12:15 p.m. was the scheduled time for everything. I spent Tuesday preparing the final report for landmass on their financial position. I needed a couple more days to prepare, so I just put the report on my desk until I finished the rest of my business. Red said he figured out a way to open Cheryl's office door remotely. You see, all the doors in their offices have electronic locks. Each employee has a microchip on their ID card, and they swipe it in front of the lock to open the door. To lock the door while inside, they press the lock/unlock button. There is a small light next to each door handle. Closed doors glow red, open doors glow green. One of their computers controls who has access to which rooms and keeps a log of all entries and exits. And guess who controls this computer now? At the right moment, I will open the door, and then, well, you know what will happen next. He was clearly pleased with himself and even smiled. And Red rarely smiled. Wednesday morning was quiet and especially gloomy. We all met for brunch and then headed to the quiet of my temporary office at landmass. At exactly noon, Cheryl's lover appeared. This was the same Brad I saw on the first day when he groped Cheryl. We all gathered around the telescope monitor and watched as they first chatted and then got down to business. I started to get nervous and worried that the bailiff would not show up on time. As we watched, their heads turned sharply towards the door, and they began frantically putting their clothes in order. A man in a suit came into view and stood in front of the table. He said something that we couldn't hear, but everyone knew what he was saying. Then he held out a large manila envelope. Cheryl took it, and the man turned and walked away. Cheryl sank heavily into her chair, and Brad just stood there looking stupid. We watched as she pulled out papers and looked at them intently. Brad tried to take the papers from her, but she pulled them away and everything flew across her desk. The photographs were scattered face up. Carefully, she took one photograph in one hand and the other in the other. One photo showed her giving the middle finger to the phone, and another showed her having sex with an old man. Her head turned sharply to the window. She ran to the window, pressing her palms to the glass and looking at our building opposite. I could clearly see the expression on her face. It was pure horror. She was exposed, and she knew it. She also knew that her world had just changed, and not for the better. I pressed her office number on the speed dial list on my cell phone. When the phone rang, she turned and looked at him like he was a rattlesnake shaking its tail. Slowly, she walked over to the phone and picked it up. Her voice was almost a sob. "Hello?" I said in a rough voice, "Tell Brady to leave." She collapsed into the chair again. She sat quietly with her head on her chest for a long time before she regained her composure. I heard her say, "Brad, go away. This is my husband." He started arguing with her when she jumped up and screamed, "Just get out. He knows everything about us, idiot. If I were in your place, I would leave and run as far from here as possible. Marty may be an accountant, but he can kick your ass from Monday to Sunday. Now get out." I waited until I saw him leave. Cheryl sat down again and turned her chair towards the window. Cheryl, if our marriage is to have any chance of saving, you must listen carefully and do everything I say, I said. No objections, no delays. You'll only get one chance, and one only. Do you understand me? Through tears, she said, yes, I understand. I'm not kidding, Cheryl. You only have one chance to save everything. Are you sure you understand? Yes, she sobbed. Okay, now here's what's going to happen. First, you quit your job. Second, you will file a sexual harassment lawsuit against each of your 4 lovers and against Enterprise as a whole. Third, you will tell me why. I saw her freeze, her empty hand rising and covering her mouth. I also heard her sobbing on the other end of the line. My hand hovered over the enter key on my computer. As soon as I click on it, all Enterprise employees and the wives of these 4 managers will receive a video of her antics. I hated to do this, but I was ready. I gave her time to collect her thoughts and waited for an answer. He waited for a long time, with his hand hanging in the air. The first words I heard on the phone were, "But Marty, I have so much invested in Enterprise. I should be." I pressed enter. I also pressed the off button on my phone. Okay, guys, I said, let's put away the rest of the equipment and go home. Take the rest of the day off. I have a meeting with the head of landmass at 2 o'clock to tell him the bad news. Go home, and we'll meet you at the office tomorrow. I glanced at the telescope screen and saw Cheryl screaming and hitting the glass in her office. Red reached over and turned off the screen, putting me out of my misery, but I still couldn't take my eyes off the blank monitor. Before I could do or say anything, my entire team, my friends, my best workmates, my geeks, my best friends in the whole world came up and hugged me. Even Ed. Everyone understood what had just happened and shared my sadness. I have never felt more love and compassion in my life than in that moment. I had the best group of friends in the world, and I knew I could weather any storm with them. I let my feelings out and let the tears flow. Cheryl, my life has been crap for the past year. It's my fault. There's no one to blame but myself. I completely ruined everything. I ruined my marriage. I ruined my career. I've messed up my mind. There is no chance that I will ever get everything back, but I decided that I would try. Exactly 1 year ago, a man walked into my office while I was having sex with my boss. I have no idea how he got there because I was sure that I had locked the door, but he was standing on the other side of the table and looking at us. Brad and I were jumping around like crazy, trying to get our clothes in order, and he just stood there with a stupid grin. I distinctly remember screaming at him, "Who the hell are you, and what do you want?" He just smiled and asked if I was Cheryl Hughes. I screamed again. That's what it says on the door. Of course I'm Cheryl. What do you want? He took a large envelope from under his coat and, handing it to me, said in the calmest voice, "Ma'am, you are being served a subpoena." At that moment, my life went downhill. Since then, I have lived in a fog. Everything before that moment is painful memories, and everything after is like a fog. It's only been in the last couple of months that my mind has worked well enough to understand what happened. Thanks to a very sensitive therapist, I now know and, more importantly, understand what brought my life to this point. Now I'll have to go through every painful moment that led up to that fateful moment to make sure I didn't miss anything. If I'm going to try to start a new life, I need to understand why I did what I did. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. We had just received permission to enter the runway and line up for departure. There are 3 flights ahead of us, so while we are waiting our turn, the safety video will begin. Thank you again for choosing Delta for your flight to Boston. The monitor above the passage came to life. All handheld items must be securely put away. Blah, blah, blah. I've heard this cliched text 1,000 times. I only have 2 hours to think about it before we land, and I'm not going to waste time on something I already know by heart. I know the procedure. Now let's think about it. We need to start, like all tragic stories, from the very beginning. But where exactly does it begin? Did it all start when I was born, or when I got married, or when I started working at Enterprise, Or maybe the day I found out about my promotion. According to my therapist, it all started in childhood. But I don't need to go back that far to revisit the events that led to me leaving my husband, now ex-husband, and my former home. I need to start from the moment when I decided to cheat on him. I remember it like yesterday. It was a cloudy Friday in October when my boss, Brad Paxton, called me into his office before lunch. He said he had good news for me. "Cheryl, come in and close the door," Brad said with a big smile. I sat in the chair opposite his desk, waiting for him to finish typing something on the computer and reflecting on my time in the company. I worked at Enterprise Research and Development and under Brad's leadership for 8 years as one of several lead account managers. My job was to coordinate all the processes, tasks, technical documentation, and interactions with the contractors that Brad and 3 other executives negotiated with our suppliers and end customers. I did my job well, and after a year I felt like I could handle anything. I was even overconfident, thinking that I could do the job of any of my bosses, and sometimes better than them. I had enough education and work experience to handle their responsibilities, but being promoted to management at Enterprise was like punching a marshmallow through a concrete wall, especially for women. I set my goal to become the first female leader at Enterprise, and nothing could stop me. The old boys club elements are still strong here. However, I got along with everyone from the courier to the general director, and was sure that everyone loved me. "Cheryl, I think I have good news for you," Brad said, leaning back in his huge chair. "What I am about to tell you must remain between us. Please don't tell anyone." "Okay, here's the thing. Ambrose St. John told the board Wednesday that he plans to retire next May. This will leave a vacancy for the position of head of logistics. I have to recommend a candidate to take his place. At the moment, I have several qualified people who could replace him, but in my mind, there is only one person, and that is you. Your work has been exemplary, your work ethic has been exceptional, and your knowledge of company procedures and contacts goes beyond your current position. In short, you are a very worthy candidate for this position. However, there are other candidates who are equally qualified. Some of them have more experience than you. I can't just appoint you and bypass everyone else. I am obliged to announce a competition and conduct interviews with everyone who passes through HR. But in the end, the decision is mine. Cheryl, I think you'll be great at this job, but I'm not sure how much you want to move up the career ladder. What are your ambitions? What would you do to show that you really want this management position?" "Mr. Paxton, I have worked hard since I came here to learn everything I can. There is no task that I cannot cope with, and no area in which I do not have experience. I even filled in for you when you were on vacation, and to be honest, I handled everything with ease. I am more than ready for new challenges, and a leadership position would be ideal for me. What can I do to prove to you that I am truly the best candidate for this position?" "I was thinking about that," he said with that same big smile. "I think we need to get out of the office to discuss this in a relaxed atmosphere and talk frankly. How about lunch? I have free time on Wednesday. How about meeting at La Chateau at noon? This way we can relax, be ourselves, and talk honestly. And I'll pay the bill." "I don't see anything wrong with that," I said, smiling back at him. "Do I need to bring something?" "No, just yourself." "Thank you, Mr. Paxton, for the opportunity. I won't disappoint you." "I'm sure you won't disappoint, Cheryl." La Chateau is one of the most luxurious restaurants in Boston. The fact that it is located in one of the glass and metal skyscrapers in the business center of the city does not make it any less prestigious. I remember walking to the table where Brad was waiting for me and thinking that I should invite Marty here one day. My dear husband works too much, and inviting him to such a dinner would be a good idea. Maybe you can even persuade him to leave work early for some good sex at home. Brad had already opened a bottle of wine and poured me a glass when I sat down. We talked a little about the responsibilities of a logistics manager before we placed our order. I tried to choose something not too expensive, but Brad insisted that I allow myself more. "It's at the company's expense," he reminded me. While we were eating, I talked about myself. I told him about my husband, about education, and even about my ambitions and dreams. After dessert, we relaxed with a glass of excellent Merlot, and by that point, I thought I had told him my whole life. Cheryl, we talked a lot about your ambitions and dreams, but you never said what you were willing to do to get my recommendation. I only want what's best for the company and will recommend the best person for the job, whoever that is. But what can you do to increase your chances? What will you do to stand out in my memory? I don't know what else I can do except show that I work hard and... No, 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 I'm not talking about what you can write on your resume. I mean personal things. Which ones, for example? I asked, not catching his thought. Well, you were ready to meet me for lunch today. How about another lunch on Monday to continue the discussion? Okay, I can do this. And I want you to think about one thing. Next Monday, I want you to answer this question. Are you willing to do whatever I ask to get this job? I mean everything. Don't answer now. Just think about it and let me know on Monday. I think the right answer may be what tips the scales in your favor. Just think and we'll talk. Waiter, check please. It wasn't until I returned to my office that I fully realized what he had just proposed. I mean everything, he said. His everything could only mean one thing, sex. I had to decide whether the risk and reward were worth taking Brad up on his offer. I couldn't concentrate on my work for the rest of the day, constantly thinking about it. I've been thinking about this all weekend too. I'm sure Marty noticed I was in a bad mood. Marty is the best lover I've ever known. Well, I've only dated 3 other men before him, but he is by far the best. I weighed all the pros and cons of cheating on my husband for a promotion at work. By Monday morning, I had mentally worked through every aspect, every risk, every option, and felt like I could separate my work and personal life enough to get the promotion. I had a plan if Brad agreed to it, and as I justified myself, it was only temporary until the work became mine. During our lunch on Monday, I asked him point blank if he meant what he said. Did you really mean everything I thought? Are you suggesting we meet outside of work for a little fun? Wait, before I answer, I need to ask you a couple of questions. Are you recording our conversation? No, why would I do this? Okay, then who did you tell about our conversation? No one. Okay, then I'll answer your first question. Yes, I want us to get to know each other better on a physical level. I want to do what I only fantasize about when you are sitting in my office. Does this answer your question? In the best possible way, I replied, and the promotion depends on this. I don't want to say it outright, but if you're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. So to speak, a quid pro quo. I leaned toward him and whispered in his ear, Okay, Brad, I want this job. I really want it. If that means sleeping with you, I'll do it. But I have several conditions. First of all, we will never meet after work. No dinners, no weekends together, no motels. Everything we do will happen at work during lunch break, either in your office or in my office. Even though we both have floor-to-ceiling windows, they look like mirrors from the outside so no one can see us. Each office has a table, a sofa, and a lock on the door. This will only happen in the office and nowhere else. Secondly, absolutely no one should find out about this. I mean no one. Third, when I say it's over, it's over. If I come up with more conditions, I'll let you know. He leaned back with a smile. I agree, he whispered back. I think we should set up regular Wednesday lunch meetings to discuss your work. Say, every Wednesday at noon in your office. Okay, just remember to lock the door when you come in. That's how it all started. This is how our first job status meeting went on Wednesday. I sat at my desk for a long time, thinking about what I had just done. For the first time since getting married, I slept with someone other than my husband. I started crying. I cheated on my husband. But I did it for something I always wanted, something that would prove to everyone that I was good at my job. Getting this promotion will show everyone that I am truly a capable worker. I needed this. Besides, Marty will never know. All I have to do is act natural when I get home. I went to the ladies' room and cleaned myself up after Brad. I tried to think of ways to not feel guilty about sleeping with Brad. If I can't cope with the guilt, I might blurt something out to Marty. I sat in this booth for a long time and thought about how to cope with the feeling of guilt, and finally came up with a plan. It might not have been the best idea I've ever had, but at least it seemed feasible. During the time Brad and I spent together, I could pretend that Marty was mean to me and that our marriage was on the verge of divorce. It would be just a game, but after Brad was done, I could come back to reality and think about my wonderful Marty again. A bit of mind games. Yes, it's possible, but I was already pretending to enjoy sex with Brad, so a little more acting wouldn't hurt, just so I wouldn't feel guilty about what I was doing. One day, right before Christmas, Brad and I were having sex when my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID and saw it was Marty. I motioned for Brad to be quiet and answered the phone. I picked up the phone and said, "Hey, honey, what's wrong?" Marty sounded happy. "I just wanted to let you know that I'm leaving work early to do some Christmas shopping. I think I'll be home around the same time as you, but if I'm not there, don't cook dinner. I'll buy something on the way." I needed to end the conversation quickly. "Okay, honey, I'll see you at home. I have a meeting to go to. See you soon." For some reason, I pointed my middle finger at the phone as I put it down. As we were getting dressed, Brad asked me why I gave the finger to the phone. I didn't know he noticed, and for a moment I didn't know what to say. "Marty and I haven't been getting along very well lately," I lied. I was angry that he called at that moment. To hell with him. I think Brad believed it, but the more I thought about it after he left, the more I convinced myself it was true, except for the part where I said Marty and I didn't get along. We got along great. I was just angry that he interrupted my pleasure. Giving him the middle finger was rude, and honestly, I don't know why I did it. Marty called a few more times while we were together, and each time I gave the phone the middle finger. Over time, it became part of my game, perhaps more out of frustration with Marty's poor timing than for any other reason. 2 days later, I received an email from Ambrose St. John, a man who was retiring soon and whose position I wanted to fill. He wrote in his message that he knew what was really going on between me and Brad in our weekly work meetings and that he wanted to talk to me about it. Otherwise, he will appeal to the board of directors. I called him and asked him to come to my office. When he arrived, he brought Brad with him. What he said was short and clear. "Mrs. Hughes, Brad, I know what goes on in your office on Wednesdays. Don't lie to me or deny me. I have proof, photographic evidence. Don't ask how I got it, just rest assured that I have it. I'll show them to you someday. So you're probably asking yourself, what do I want? I want to be a part of your little meetings. Otherwise, I'll go to the board of directors and show them my photos." I just sat there with my head down. I didn't look at Brad. I knew what this old guy wanted. Maybe he didn't know why I agreed to have sex with Brad in the first place, but if he actually had the pictures, then any chance I had of getting promoted was gone. I could even get fired. I looked at him and asked, "What exactly do you want?" He smiled slightly, stood up, closed and locked the door, and then walked over to me. I had no choice. "That was very good, Mrs. Hughes," he said, walking to the door and zipping it up. "Why don't you give us work appointments on Thursdays? I seem to have some free time at lunch." And he left. Brad and I looked at each other. "Sorry," he said quietly. "I don't know how he found out. What are you going to do?" "Damn, I have no choice," I replied. "I want his job, so I'll probably see him on Thursdays until he retires." Brad shook his head, then stood up and walked out. Wonderful. Now I have two office lovers. A week before Christmas, I started a schedule. Brad on Wednesdays, Ambrose on Thursdays. Later, when everything came out, I found out that Ambrose did not actually have any photographs. He lied. By this time, we had been hosting our lunch meetings for quite some time. As I thought about it, I realized that he had manipulated me quite easily into doing things I didn't want to do. That's probably why he was a good manager. One Thursday, at the end of January, Ambrose came with a surprise. He brought one of the other managers. I just stood there and looked at the two of them as Ambrose spoke. "Mrs. Hughes, Cheryl, I was telling my good friend Tom how beautiful you are. He didn't believe me, so I invited him over to see for himself. And I told him, what do you look like without that business suit? I stood there, not knowing what to do. I didn't want another manager to know that I was having sex for a promotion. But this old guy said he had pictures of me and Brad, and I couldn't risk him sending them to the board, otherwise they would probably fire me. If I lost my job, then all the betrayal would have been in vain. I was trapped and I knew it. So, as they say, went all in. But I didn't know what to do with Tom standing next to me. Mrs. Hughes, I asked you to do something, Ambrose growled. Remember about the photographs? Like a trapped animal, I just stood there and wondered how deep the hole I was digging for myself was. I raised my hands and began to unbutton my blouse and did what they wanted. I think Mrs. Hughes will be able to invite you to dinner on Tuesday, Ambrose said. By the time my mind returned from heaven, they had already disappeared. Now I have 3 lovers. The week started over, and I spent Monday thinking about what I was going to do for lunch on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, especially Tuesday. And I was not disappointed. When Tom showed up on Tuesday, I found myself wanting him more than I'd ever wanted another man before, almost as much as I wanted my husband. He was a handsome man. His body was tall, strong, and well-toned. When we finished getting dressed, I found that I couldn't look him in the eyes. Guilt for what I did arose. Usually it wouldn't be felt until they were gone, but I was on the verge of tears standing in front of him, knowing that I had just made love to someone who wasn't my husband. And make no mistake, we were making love, not just sex. That's why I felt so guilty. He must have known how I felt because he came over and hugged me, pulling me closer to his body. I started crying into his shoulder. "Did I hurt you, Cheryl?" he asked. I started to smile. He didn't know why I was crying. He thought he must have hurt me. This is wrong. I was hurting myself by embarking on my own personal path of destruction. "I'm fine," I said. "See you next week." After he left, I sat and thought about the past hour spent on the couch with him. I alternately smiled and cried, but crying won. After a while, I couldn't stop crying. The 3 of us continued like this for several weeks. One Friday, they all came unannounced and locked the door. This was the first time I entertained all 3 of them at the same time. The only manager I didn't sleep with regularly was David Loretta. I couldn't understand why he wasn't on the list, and I was glad about it, until one Monday he showed up shortly before lunch and sat down opposite me. "Ambrose told me about your status meetings during lunch and said that you still have Monday. Well, it's Monday and I'm here, so show me what you have to offer." Now I have 4 lovers. Our lunchtime status meetings continued for several more weeks. The following month, we had another 2-hour session on a Friday, this time with all 4 men. One Wednesday, a few weeks later, I was surprised when Brad and I were having sex. Marty called. "Hi, honey," I said, trying not to show that I was worried. "This is a pleasant surprise. What happened?" He was silent for a moment. I forced myself to control my voice so that he wouldn't hear anything. "Honey, is everything okay?" I asked when he didn't say anything for a long time. I, I, I just called to tell you how much I love you," he finally managed to get out. "Aw, that's so cute," I cooed. "I love you too." "Yes, I was sitting here, looking out the window and thinking how much I missed you. I can't wait to be in your arms again tonight." "Honey, that's so sweet. I can't wait to be with you either. Listen, I'm a little busy right now. Can I call you back after lunch?" "Sure, why don't you go back to what you were doing and call me when you're done? Enjoy. Bye." I hung up and did it again, spontaneously, without thinking. I pointed at the phone as if to say, "Go to hell," to the phone and Marty. I went through a period of guilt after that, but this time I felt bad about something else. I hadn't planned on giving Marty the finger. I'd done it before, and now it bothered me. I figured it was all a game, but for some reason pointing the finger at Marty this time just felt completely wrong. I know Brad saw me do it because I saw the smile on his face. I think he felt superior. Perhaps my acting was out of control. Maybe I needed to rethink what I was doing. Maybe, I went on and tried to justify why I did it, and I couldn't find anything concrete. I just put it away in my mind and continued for the week. On Thursday, Ambrose was rushing to meet a client for lunch, so everything was done quickly. Friday was another one of our monthly 4 sessions. When I returned home that evening, I discovered that Marty had left me a message that he was going to his father's for the weekend. He'd done this before, so I didn't think anything of it. I just cooked dinner and watched some TV. I missed Marty. When Marty wasn't around, I always felt like there was something missing in my life, like there was a hole in my heart the size of the Grand Canyon. Before going to bed, I took a hot bubble bath. The guilt struck again. It took me a long time to fall asleep. I felt so bad. On Monday, I had sex with David. Marty called me again and told me he loved me, and I pointed my finger at the phone again. What came over me? Tuesday was Tom. On Wednesday, my life was cut short. Brad and I just started our status meeting. We were both half naked. Suddenly, a man in a cheap suit came through the door. I'm sure I locked the door, but he came in. Brad and I separated and quickly put everything back in our clothes. The man just stood in front of my desk with a slight smirk on his face. "What the hell do you want?" I screamed at him. "Are you Cheryl Hughes?" That's all he said. "Of course, that's what it says on the door. Who are you and what do you want?" He handed me a large envelope made of thick paper. I looked at it for a long time and then took it. "Madam, you have been served," he said. He left with the same grin on his face. I sat down heavily in the chair. Brad stood next to me and looked stupid. I opened the envelope and pulled out the papers. Above was a petition for divorce. I was so stunned that I couldn't speak. Brad reached out and tried to take the papers from my hand, but I pulled away. I tried to hold them, but the two of us scattered them all over the table. There were also a few face-up photographs. I saw that they were photographs of my office and me, and carefully, I took one photograph in my left hand and the other in my right. I looked at them and my life flashed before my eyes. In one photo, I'm holding out my middle finger to my phone. How the hell did he manage to? I never finished my sentence. I knew where they came from. I turned to look out the window. I saw another huge glass and chrome building across the street and realized that whoever received these photos took them from there. I ran to the window, placing my hands on the glass and looking at the building across the street. I'm sure anyone who looks at me will see the look of absolute horror on my face. It was then that I realized that my life was over. My phone started ringing. I froze. I knew exactly who called. I didn't want to hear the voice on the other end of the line, but I slowly walked towards the phone. "Hello?" I said with a sob. "Tell Brad to leave," Marty growled. I fell back into my chair, pressing the phone to my ear and dropping my chin to my chest. "Brad, go away. This is my husband." He started saying something nonsensical, so I jumped up and screamed at him. "Just get the hell out. He knows everything about us, idiot. If I were you, I would run away from here and run as far as I could. Marty may be an accountant, but he can kick your ass from here until Sunday. Now come out." When he left, I sat down again and turned my chair to face the window. I sat there waiting for Marty to say something, anything that would put me out of my misery. He said, "Cheryl, if there is any chance that our marriage will survive, you need to listen carefully and do exactly what I say. No arguing, no hesitation. You have one chance and one chance only. You understand?" "Yes, I understand," I said through tears. "I'm not messing around, Cheryl. You only have one chance to save everything. Are you sure you understand?" "Yes," I sobbed. "Okay, now here's what's going to happen. First of all, you're about to quit your job. Second, you're going to file a sexual harassment lawsuit against each of your 4 lovers and enterprise as a whole. Third, you're going to tell me why." I hesitated and sat silently sobbing. I was silent for a long time. Finally, I realized that I had to say something. I chose the wrong thing to say. "But Marty, I have a lot invested in the enterprise. I'm going to become the first female manager." "Hello? Marty? Hello, are you here? He hung up. I dropped the phone and flew to the window screaming and banging on the glass. I can't tell you how long I fought against the window before I fell to the floor, sobbing. I destroyed everything. Marty knew I was cheating on him and was divorcing me. Oh my God, what did I do to him? I just lay on the floor and cried. I don't know how long I cried before I heard a knock on the door. I wiped my face as best I could and went to answer. Ambrose stood there with the most hateful look on his face I had ever seen, and behind him I saw everyone in the office standing and looking at us. "You stinking bitch," he spat at me. Then he hit me. When I looked up, Tom and Brad grabbed him by the arms and pulled him out of my office. I was just sitting on the floor when one of the other account managers reached over to close the door. "Excellent, woman of easy virtue," she said with a smile. "Now I am confident that I will get a promotion. See you." How could everyone know about my divorce papers? What's happening? I didn't understand anything except that Marty knew and threw me out. I started crying again and went back to my desk. I tried to call Marty back, but his phone just went to voicemail. I must have tried a dozen times, but he didn't respond to any of them. I only left him one message. "Marty, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Please call me back and talk to me. I screwed up and I need you to talk to me. Please call me. I'm desperate, Marty. Please call me back." He didn't. As I sat at my desk crying and waiting for his call, I saw the incoming email icon flashing. I received a new email. Hoping it was from Marty, I quickly opened it. It said, "See what's happening in your office right under your nose." There was also an embedded video. I clicked on the video, and an image appeared on the screen of me having sex with men. I couldn't move my hand to press stop. I was frozen in horror at what I was watching. The video ended with the ending of the Porky Pig cartoon from Looney Tunes. "Thea, Thea, Thea, this is all, folks." I slid out of my seat and fell to the floor, sobbing. When two guards came in, I didn't hear them. They helped me to my feet and told me I had 1 hour to collect all my personal belongings before I was to be escorted out of the building. They also handed me an envelope with a letter of resignation. Somehow, through tears and sobs, I collected everything. As I put things into boxes, I thought, 9 years of hard work and dedication at Enterprise flew by in the blink of an eye, with nothing more than a slap in the face from one of my managers. Not only did I screw up the Enterprise, I screwed up Marty as well. I needed to pack everything in the car and get him home. I needed to talk to him and explain everything. Perhaps I had a chance to save my marriage. Marty disappeared. He took out most of his clothes and personal belongings and left me alone. There was a short note from him on the kitchen table. It said, "Cheryl, don't call me, don't try to find me, don't come to my work, don't do anything. If you need to contact me, call my lawyer. You have his card in the divorce papers. Sign them and let's get this over with quickly. You've already ruined enough lives. Marty." I was incredibly devastated. I cried for 2 days straight, desperately hoping that Marty would come back and forgive me. He didn't. I just sat at our house and waited for news from him. Nothing. I read the divorce petition and it said, "Irreconcilable differences." He could have grabbed me by the throat and said adultery, so I guess that was his way of being polite. About a week after I left Enterprise, an attorney called me and said he was going to represent me in a sexual harassment lawsuit against Enterprise. I don't know how he got all the information, videos and everything, but he had everything, including all the emails from the Enterprise email system. Marty must have assigned him to take over my case. Thinking I could get back to Marty if I did what he told me to do, quit my job in the first place, file sexual harassment charges against the managers and Enterprise, and tell him why, then maybe we had a chance. After the lawsuit is over, maybe he will listen to me. He didn't. The lawyer did his job well. I told him everything and answered all the questions about all the intimate details of our dates. He sued each of the men and the Enterprise for $1 million. After several meetings and one personal meeting with Enterprise's lawyers, we reached an agreement. They gave me just over $100,000 to, as they so eloquently put it, put this sordid episode behind me. Enterprise fired 3 managers and Ambrose retired, also part of the settlement. After it was all over, I called Marty's divorce lawyer and told him that I had quit my job and filed sexual harassment charges against the company. Since I had done everything Marty wanted me to do, I asked when we could meet and talk. He simply asked, "Why did you point your finger at the phone when you were talking to Marty?" This question made me hysterical again. I couldn't say anything, and he hung up. I called him 3 more times, and each time he asked the same question, and each time I lost my temper. I finally gave up. After a month of being alone with my suffering, I called my cousin in Cincinnati and told her about my problems. She said that I should move in with her and look for a new job there. Everything has disappeared in Boston, so it would be good for me to start over. I thought about what she said for a week before I signed the divorce papers and packed my things. I left everything to Marty. I only took my clothes and a few souvenirs. I left everything else behind. I left Marty a note on the kitchen table saying goodbye and begging him to call me at my cousin's number. He never did. I spent the first month alternately crying and thinking about death. One day I was at my lowest and tried to quit this life. Rachel found me and called an ambulance. At the hospital, I had to see a psychiatrist. We talked about what I did to get to this point in my life. She said she had heard all this before and recommended that I see another psychiatrist who specializes in grief counseling. She said that divorce is as devastating as the death of a loved one, and grief counseling would do me a lot of good. So I started talking to him twice a week. Eventually, I realized what I had done and decided that I didn't really want to die. I wanted to live again, but I wanted to live with Marty. My therapist helped me develop a plan that would help me come to my senses, understand why I did what I did, and how to try to get back to my life with Marty. But he was very careful when he said that I might never get it back. Deep down, I knew he was right, but I had to try. I received final divorce papers 4 months after I left Boston. As a result of the property settlement, I was paid a lump sum of $100,000, accompanied by a check for that amount. I did not receive any alimony, any part of Marty's business, or his pension. I agreed to let Marty sell the house and split the profits. 2 months of psychotherapy seemed like a waste of time as I stood there and sadly looked at the remnants of my past life. And here I sit, looking at the ground at an altitude of about 35,000 feet, and remember my ruined life. I've made some huge mistakes, but I've also come a long way towards understanding why they happened, and I can guarantee they will never happen again. With hope, when I come to Boston, there will be a man who will listen to my story and take pity on me. Maybe I can get my life back. Maybe he will love me again. But then maybe not. The captain announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are about 10 minutes from Logan International Airport, and I have turned on the fasten seat belt sign, so please return to your seats and—" Wow, when did I fall asleep? The last thing I remember is the woman in the middle seat asking me if I was okay. It was awkward. I didn't even know I was crying. I tried to smile when I lied that everything was fine, but it seems she didn't believe me. She handed me a napkin and looked at me with kindness, saying that, "No matter what problems we have in life, God is watching over us. Just talk to him." It would be something new. Of course, I talked to my therapist, but all I got was a bunch of theories about low self-esteem, lack of confidence, and narcissistic tendencies. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to have a little conversation with him. I thought that when I got on the plane, I would review everything that had happened in the last couple of years, and that would help. But it just hit me in the face again with all the bad decisions I've made, all the lies I've done, and all the pain I've caused. The unhappiness I felt was just as intense at 35,000 feet as it was when I experienced it a year ago. I wasn't just rewatching it, I was reliving the worst period of my life, and realized that I wasn't finding anything new that would help me prepare for the meeting with Marty. I didn't find anything. Everything was the same as before. I'm a liar, and I've ruined the lives of a dozen or more people. Why? Because I wanted to be a cool manager. I wanted to be important. I wanted to be someone. Now I'm nobody. My name is Cheryl Smith. I used to be Cheryl Hughes, but I ruined it. One of the terms of the divorce was that I would never use my married name again, so I had to revert to Smith. It seems to have caused me more pain than anything else. I didn't want child support. I didn't want our apartment. I didn't even want our savings. All I wanted was Marty. But this was not destined to come true. I had hurt him too much for any words, any apologies, any justifications or explanations to heal the wound in his heart. I completely destroyed the man I loved, and with him myself. I rented a car and headed west on I-90 to my old house in Waltham. I'd driven this route back and forth from Boston 1,000 times, but this time it felt foreign. I wasn't going home. I was going to my former house, the place where my ex-husband lived, where my former life was. A shiver ran through me. I felt like a stranger in a strange land. In addition, one tear rolled down and fell on my chest. If everything goes well, the journey will take only 30 minutes. Traffic was flowing, and I was lucky, and Saturday morning traffic is usually light, unless Boston College has a football game in the afternoon. I drove up to our old house in 25 minutes, but I couldn't move. I was frozen behind the wheel of my rental car, too scared to do what I'd come 1,000 miles to do. I sat for a long time, thinking about the first words I would say to Marty. Hey Marty, surprise. No, too frivolous. Hey Marty, judging by the look on your face, you're surprised to see me. No, his expression may not be surprise, but fear or, even worse, hatred. Hey Marty, before you slam the door in my face, I want you to know that I came here to apologize to you. Not bad, but don't give him ideas about slamming the door. Hey Marty, I'm here to apologize for everything. Can you spare some time to talk to me? Well, we'll have to stop there. I should have spent the time on the plane thinking about what to say to him, not reliving the whole nightmare I had caused him. I took a deep breath and walked towards the door. Everything looked the same, except that the azaleas that lined both sides of the path were gone. I bought them for him when we moved into our house. He always loved those azaleas, and the beautiful white flowers made him smile every spring, and when he smiled, I smiled too. I pressed the doorbell and waited nervously. Yes, said the man, opening the door. It wasn't Marty. Where's Marty? The man who answered the door was tall and slender, wearing only a checkered robe and slippers. He smiled slightly friendly, but looked at me with some caution. Who's at the door, Josh? Another man, a little plumper and also in a checkered robe and slippers, came up from behind and put his hand on the first one's shoulder. How can we help? Asked the second man. I didn't know what to say. I expected Marty to be standing in the doorway and even prepared an opening speech, but instead 2 middle-aged men who looked like they had just woken up looked at me like I was crazy. I'm looking for Marty Hughes, was all I could get out. Oh, Mr. Hughes moved in 4 or 5 months ago, replied the second man. When was this, Josh? The first man, whose name was Josh, replied, It's been about 6 months. He moved before Christmas. Remember, we moved after the New Year, and the house was empty for a while. Exactly, said the second man. Once again, my mouth and mind didn't want to work together. I just stood there with my mouth open. A few seconds passed, but I stammered, I'm looking for Marty Hughes. The men smiled and said in unison, You already said it. They turned to each other, laughed loudly, and hugged each other. I felt my cheeks start to heat up. Sorry, I said, embarrassed. I am his wife. Well, more precisely, I was. I came here to, talk. I used to live here. Yeah, we heard about you, Josh said. Oh, sorry, that's not what I meant. Randy, what did the real estate agent say? Randy, the second man, responded, She said the previous owners got divorced and sold the house as part of a property settlement. She didn't go into detail, other than to say the divorce wasn't easy. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, Josh said. Do you want to come in? We can buy you some coffee and you could take a tour of the house. We changed a lot and now everything looks great. No, thanks. I think I'd better go. Do you happen to have Mr. Hughes's new address? The men exchanged puzzled glances. No, I don't think we have one, Randy replied. We never actually met Mr. Hughes. We only worked through his realtor. Sorry. Thank you, I thanked with a smile that I was able to persuade myself to give. Sorry to bother you. I turned around and walked back to the car. When I got there, I found another tear ready to fall on my chest. I left without knowing where to go. I found myself in a small restaurant where Marty and I often went. Sitting over a cup of coffee, I thought about what to do next. Marty sometimes worked on Saturdays, so maybe I could catch him at work. His office was downtown, not far from where I worked when I lived here. I quickly finished my coffee and drove back to the center towards the airport. I had to drive past my old place of work and felt anxious when I was there. The last time I was on this street was when I met with Enterprise's lawyers regarding a sexual harassment claim. I was very depressed at the time and don't remember much about the meeting. I only remember the hurtful words that the lawyer said to me and how every word hurt. I parked in the garage next to Marty's office and walked into his building. I don't think he's there, said the old guard, but you can go up and check. The door was locked, and through the glass part, I saw that there was no light inside. I noticed something strange. On the door it used to be written M. Hughes, CPA, and now it read Hughes and Associates. I wondered what this meant. I got back into the car, trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to do this, but I knew one of his employees might know where he was. If anyone knew, it was Mandy. I still had her address in the phone book as an emergency contact at Marty's work. I entered her address into the GPS and went there. I felt a little hope along the way. "Mom, there's someone at the door," shouted a little girl in a soccer uniform. I waited a long time before Mandy walked out onto the porch and quietly closed the door behind her. "What the hell do you want?" she hissed, bile dripping from every word. "I'm looking for Marty," I said softly. "I came to talk to him, to apologize. When I arrived at our house, he was no longer there. I came here knowing that you know where he is. Could you give me his address?" "Yes, I know his address, but I would rather freeze in hell than give it to you. How dare you even show up here again? What, didn't you cause enough pain and suffering the last time you were here? Return to finish what she started and completely destroy him. There's no way I'm going to let you hurt him again. He outlived you. He forgot you. You are just a bad memory for him, a nightmare that sometimes pops up to remind him how lucky he is that you are no longer there. Leave. Crawl back under the rock you crawled out from under." She turned around and slammed the door in my face. All hope of finding Marty was gone. I drive on, crying, really crying, loudly and bitterly. I had to pull into the parking lot of some fast food restaurant to try to pull myself together. I couldn't drive and cry at the same time. I used up 3 or 4 napkins before I calmed down enough to notice that the people at the tables outside were looking at me. My body was still shaking, and I couldn't think clearly, but gradually I began to emerge from my despair. I heard a tapping on the car window next to me. I lowered the window a few centimeters. "Are you okay, miss?" asked the gray-haired man. I sniffled and wiped it off with a napkin again. "I'll be fine," I replied. "I just had a very strong shock, that's all. I'll feel better in a few minutes. Thank you for your trouble." The man returned to one of the tables and sat down next to a small boy, about 9 or 10 years old. He continued to watch me out of the corner of his eye, but turned his attention to the boy. Perhaps his son, or perhaps his grandson, I thought. They looked so happy with each other. I'm so happy. "Crap," I said quietly under my breath. "Father Marty." I knew exactly where I needed to go now. Marty's father will certainly help me contact him. His dad and I always got along, even through the divorce and everything. I quickly entered his address into the GPS and drove off. The journey took a little over an hour. I knew the route without GPS, but I needed someone to tell me what to do and where to turn. My mind was too foggy at that moment. When I arrived at his house, I was in for a real shock. There was a large white "For Sale" sign in the middle of the yard. I got out of the car and went to the door. On the doorknob was a real estate agent's lock and a note that read, In case of emergency, call Ash Real Estate. Looking through the windows near the door, I saw empty wooden floors and bare walls. The house was empty. Marty's father no longer lived here. He left too. I sank heavily onto the steps of the porch and began to cry again. Most of my tears had already been cried after visiting Mandy, but a few new ones found their way. This trip to find someone I still had feelings for was turning into a disaster. I was met with failure at every step. Marty could have lived on the moon. I couldn't find anyone to tell me where he was. My hysteria did not last long, and soon I began to look around. Across the road, I saw an elderly woman working in her garden. Perhaps she knew something about his father. "Mr. Hughes died 3 months ago," said an elderly woman from the other side of the old picket fence. "It was right after the New Year, if I'm not mistaken. He had a heart attack and died right there in his driveway. I heard that some circumstances were putting pressure on him. He just couldn't stand it. Sad. He was a good man, quiet but kind. His son and daughter, as well as many of their friends, came here to remove things from the house. They are good people, as kind as their father. They gave away a lot of what was in the house to neighbors. I received a very nice set of porcelain figurines and his gas grill. Sad, very sad. I returned to the car in a complete stupor. Fortunately, there were no cars driving along the street, otherwise I might not have existed anymore. My journey has come to an end. I flew 1,000 miles to talk to the only person in the world for whom I still had feelings, and I couldn't find him. I experienced failure at every step. It's time to go home. Right then and there I gave up. On the way out of town, I stopped at the cemetery where Marty's father was buried. I wanted to honor his memory and say goodbye. I loved Marty's father. He was a kind and wise man. It was he who advised me to seek help from a psychotherapist. I knew his seat was already reserved next to his beloved wife, Beverly. I walked up the hill and saw his name, recently carved into a dark granite tombstone. I couldn't cry. The tears are over. When I most wanted to cry, they weren't there. I promised myself that when I returned home, I would definitely talk to God. As I stood over the grave, I noticed a white wicker basket full of flowers leaning against one side of the headstone. There was a card attached to it. I picked it up and read, "We miss you with all our hearts. Love, Brenda and Marty." The flowers were from Marty and his sister, and the handwritten note on the card was from a local florist. The florist's shop was just outside of town, so maybe if I stopped by and asked politely, they'd give me Marty's address. This was my last hope. The young man in the flower shop was $100 richer, and I was richer at Marty's address. For the first time in days, I smiled. I knew where he was. I'll still see him. I gave up too early. The GPS showed the way, and I followed it, knowing that I would soon see it. The journey took an hour and a half, according to the clock on the dashboard, but for me it was only a few minutes. I drove up to the address the florist gave me and saw a cute white bungalow with blue shutters. On the front porch were 2 wicker rocking chairs and a small wicker table. The lawn was neat, the bushes around the porch were trimmed. The mailbox said Hughes, so I knew I had found it. There was a parking space, but there was no car. I thought with alarm that he was not at home and went to the door to knock. Silence, no one answered. He was not at home. I stood still forever. Nobody opened it. I was crushed. For the umpteenth time that day, I sat down and cried. So close, I lamented. But I was determined to wait for him. If he doesn't return before dark, I'll look for a place to stay for the night and return in the morning. In the meantime, I was going to sit on his rocking chair and wait. After about an hour, I got bored and started wandering around the house. I saw Marty's footprints everywhere. 2 azalea bushes from our old house stood proudly in the center of the rock garden in the backyard. In the center of the garden was an ancient sundial with the inscription, "Grow old with me, the best is yet to come." Marty said this Robert Browning quote was his favorite romantic quote. There was a gas grill on the deck that he'd bought just before. Well, just before the end, I felt Marty everywhere. It seemed like I could almost smell his cologne. I was standing on the same grass as him. I breathed the same air, enjoyed the same sun. It was wonderful. But Marty was not at home. I needed to be patient. I'll definitely see him eventually. I returned to the front porch and looked around again. The house and the neighborhood looked exactly as Marty had described it when he talked about what he wanted our house to look like when we had kids. The color of the house was perfect. The front garden was perfect. The other houses in the area were perfect. Even the little children's park down the street was perfect. It was everything Marty described as his ideal home to raise a family. This was supposed to be our home when we had children. But this was not our home. This was his home. I'm no longer a part of his life. After some time, I went to that children's park and sat down at a small table in the shape of a giant green turtle. I thought back to everything Marty and I talked about when we were planning our children. He had so many plans, and he knew exactly what he wanted. He even knew how many children we would have. 2, a boy and a girl. I think he even had names already thought of. But I ruined everything with my ambitions and stupidity. Now we will never have children together, we will never have a house in the suburbs, and we will never live happily for the rest of our lives. But if Marty comes home and I tell him how sorry I am and how much I still love him, maybe he'll forgive me. Then maybe a happy life awaits us after all. This time there were enough tears. My head fell on the table, hidden under my hands, and I began to cry. My body was shaking with deep sobs. I looked into the abyss and screamed. For the 100th time, I wanted to die. Without Marty, my life had no meaning. Oh God, how my heart hurt. In the midst of all my tears, I felt a hand on my shoulder. I wiped my eyes with my sleeve and turned around. Marty was standing there. He was next to me. His hand was on my shoulder. There was a sad smile on his face, but he was there. I jumped up from the small table, hugged him around the neck, and hugged him tightly, as if he could fly away at any moment. I cried on his neck, repeating his name over and over again, telling him how much I missed him and how much I loved him. He just stood there holding me in his arms and let me cry on his shoulder. And then I saw others. 3 women stood at the edge of a small park. I recognized Mandy and Adriana, but I didn't recognize the young Asian woman. All 3 stood with their arms crossed over their chests, and their looks, full of contempt, could have killed me on the spot. "Hey, Cheryl," Marty said quietly in my ear. "Do you want to come in?" I continued to hold on to him, afraid to do something that would ruin this moment. I found him again and wasn't going to let him go. "Never. Let's go," he said. "Let's talk inside." He gently released my hands from his neck, took my hand, and slowly led me up the hill towards the house, while the other women followed at a distance. Nobody said a word. When we entered the house, he released my hand and showed me where the bathroom was. I realized that I hadn't gone to the toilet since I arrived at the airport. While I was in the bathroom, I washed my face and applied some fresh makeup. My face looked terrible after crying all day. He was waiting outside the door when I left. "Let's go to the backyard," Marty suggested quietly. "I have a lot to tell you, and I guess you didn't come here to try my cooking. You probably want that conversation that we never had. I think it's time. Let's go." 3 women were busy in the kitchen preparing food when we passed by. Nobody said a word to us. We silently walked out the back door onto the terrace, and they continued to secretly cast sharp glances at me. We sat in complete silence for a long time, sneaking glances at each other, hoping that someone would start a conversation and break this terrible tension. None of us seemed to know where to start or, indeed, how to do it. I wanted to tell him how sorry I was. I wanted to confess all my sins. I wanted to fall to the floor, kiss his feet, and beg for forgiveness. I wanted to tell him how much I still love him. I wanted to tell him everything that was in my soul. But I didn't know how to start. I had flown 1,000 miles to see him, and now, as I sat opposite him, I could not say a word. "How are you, Cheryl?" he asked. "I feel better now, Marty. How are you?" "Fine. But I don't think you came here to exchange pleasantries. Why don't you tell me what's been going on in your life since?" He didn't finish the sentence, looking at his hands. I decided not to hold back any longer and told it like it was. "Marty, I don't know how much you know, so I'll just tell you everything briefly. A sexual harassment lawsuit against Enterprise has been settled between attorneys. We didn't have to go to court or arbitration. They paid me a fair amount of compensation, and with the money you gave me, I had enough money to move to Cincinnati and start over. My cousin Rachel helped me a lot. Do you remember Rachel? She was at our wedding, the one with the limp. So she helped me find housing and work. Now I work for a software company, training clients to use our systems. The work is good, and the people there are nice too. I've been seeing a therapist since I left Boston. He helped me understand why I did what I did. The most important thing I realized is that everything, absolutely everything, is my fault. You didn't do anything to cause this. All the blame lies with me. You were just an innocent bystander. I know that I asked you for forgiveness 1,000 times before our divorce, and every time I sincerely said it, and now I also say it with full awareness. I'm so sorry for everything I've done to you, to us. I understand that words cannot change what happened, but I want you to hear them anyway. Forgive me, Marty, for everything. For a long time after you found out what happened, I was in a terrible state. I even tried to die once. Unfortunately, even in this, I was a failure. My therapist said it was a desperate act to get your attention. He's probably right, but I didn't do it to cause you more pain. I was just trying to get rid of my own. But you never knew about it. Rachel didn't call and tell you. As I said, I was completely distraught. I didn't think death would harm you in any way. And what I did with the managers from Enterprise also, it seemed to me, could not harm you. I thought that if you didn't find out, you wouldn't get hurt. How wrong I was. I never realized how much I was hurting myself, which in turn was hurting you. My therapist also told me something that I didn't know, but looking back on my life, he was right. He said that I had little confidence in my abilities and low self-esteem. This meant that I believed that I could not get promoted on merit alone. This is the main reason why I did what I did. Sex with Brad was supposed to guarantee me a promotion. I later learned that the CEO had already discussed my promotion with the board of directors. I made an incredibly bad decision to have an affair with Brad, and things got out of control with the other three. I'm not going to make excuses and say that I was forced into this. I did this of my own free will. I thought it would all end as soon as I got promoted. I didn't think about what would happen next. Marty, I don't know how you found out, and I don't care. All I know is what you found out. When you sent out that video of my experiences with 4 managers to everyone in the company, I was devastated. It didn't hurt me that everyone saw me having sex. It hurt me that you were so crushed that you wanted to hurt me back. I deserve it. I understand this now, and I would be willing to accept any punishment you chose, if only you would listen to me and allow me to apologize. But you didn't. When your lawyer said that you refused to talk to me and didn't want to see me anymore, I completely lost my mind. I destroyed the only man I've ever loved, and you refused to listen to me. And God, what I did to the families of these men. Did you know that 3 of them got divorced because of what we did? The 4th's wife said she could make his life more miserable by staying married to him than by divorcing him. I think that's what she's doing. Marty, I helped destroy 4 families, 5 to be exact, including ours. The wives and children of these men did not deserve this. You don't deserve this. All because I wanted to get this position. When I filed a sexual harassment claim, 3 of them were fired from the company and the 4th retired. I don't know what happened to them next because I didn't communicate with them, but I'm sure I ruined their lives. These are more than a dozen people whose destinies I destroyed because of my ambitions. The lies I told you were also terrible. To hide what I had done, I started lying about everything. Please believe me, Marty. Up until that moment, from our wedding day, I always shared everything with you. And then the lies began. It all started with Brad, and I lied to cover it up. For this, I sincerely apologize. I hope someday you can trust me again. If not, I'll understand. I want to say a couple more things before I start crying again. I hope you'll believe me when I say that all the sex I had with these men didn't mean half as much to me as one night in your loving arms meant. It sounds cliché, I know, but they used my body for sex, and I made love to you. I've never done anything with them that I haven't done with you. I never had as much fun with them as I did with you. And most importantly, I never told them that I loved them. I told them many other lies, but I never said these words. I spoke these words only to you, and always sincerely. And I swear to God, I love you as much now as I did then. Last year was hell for me. Not having you in my life has made me half a person, and I imagine this year has been just as difficult for you. But Marty, I'm ready to do anything to get you back. I will accept any punishment, any conditions, any sacrifice. Tell me what you want, and I will do it. No matter what, I'll do it. If you want me to fall on the floor and kiss your feet, I will do it. If you want to publicly humiliate me in front of my family and friends, I will stand there and accept it. If you want to get revenge by having sex with other women while I watch, you can do that. Do whatever you want with me, just let me into your life again. Please, I'm begging. I started sobbing and couldn't continue. Marty sat quietly in his chair without moving and listened. He didn't move or say anything. During the whole time I was talking, I only glanced at his face a couple of times. I didn't have the courage to look him in the eyes. I couldn't understand what he was thinking. Sorry, Adriana said, looking out the door. If you want to eat, we are just serving dinner. When you're ready, come in. As quickly as she appeared, she disappeared just as quickly. Do you want to take a break? Marty asked. We can eat a little if you want. Some time ago, I realized that I hadn't gone to the toilet since I arrived, and now I realized that I hadn't eaten either. I'd like to clean myself up a little, if you don't mind, I said, wiping tears from my cheek. Marty walked me again to the bathroom and then into the dining room. When we entered, I saw that there were now 5 people sitting at the table. The 3 women were joined by a tall, red-haired man and a young girl with black hair, many piercings and tattoos, who looked quite intimidating. We all ate in silence, and everyone carefully watched my every move, as if they were waiting for something. Dinner was hell. I wanted to hear Marty's story, and I kept playing with my food, hoping that he would say that he still loved me too. Waiting for him to say he wanted me back was pure agony. After dinner, everyone collected their plates and took them to the kitchen, just standing in tense silence. When Marty walked away to wash his hands, the group of people changed dramatically. Mandy and Adriana came right up to the refrigerator and were literally nose to nose with me. Mandy glared at me and said, I want your ass out of here as soon as you say what you came for. I told you I wouldn't let you hurt him, and I meant it. If necessary, I will personally drag your vile ass out and send you back to where you came from. Adriana added after Mandy said, Yes, bitch, if this man sheds one tear because of anything you say or do today, I will find you and beat you until there is nothing left of you. Marty is our friend, and we don't want him to get hurt anymore. You're begging for forgiveness, and asking him to love you again will only bring him pain. He's in a better place now, and he's already moved on. Forget about him and go home. You left him. I looked back and saw the other 3 standing and watching us. The girl with piercings smiled at me in such a way that I immediately felt uneasy. I wanted to run and hide, but Marty came back and saved me. Cheryl, let's go outside again and finish our conversation. I'll get you something to drink. I went out onto the terrace and stood there, watching everyone through the window. At one point, the young Asian woman said something to Marty, and he smiled. It was the first smile on his face that I had seen in a very, very long time. I missed that smile more than I could imagine. It hurt me that someone else made him smile. Marty brought out 2 bottles of water, and when we sat down again, he began to talk. Cheryl, I appreciate your honesty today. You told me what happened to you after everything fell apart. I feel that you have changed. Perhaps you have faced your demons. Perhaps you truly understand the consequences of your actions. Whatever happens, I need to ask one question that I want an honest answer to. After this, I will tell you about myself, and we can talk about ourselves. Cheryl, my lawyer asked you a simple question several times, but you couldn't or didn't want to answer it. He said that every time he asked that question, you went into hysterics. I don't want to hurt you, but I need an answer. Without him, our conversation is meaningless. Fine. Here's my question. Why did you show your middle finger when you hung up after talking to me when you were with these guys? I knew he was pushing for an answer to this question, and I think I was ready to answer him now. Marty, I've done a lot of stupid things in my life, but I think giving you the middle finger was probably the stupidest thing. At least the rudest ones. My therapist and I talked at length about this, and now I can explain why I did it. There is no easy answer, and there is more than one reason, but the main reason is that I was trying to convince myself, as well as the man who was with me at the time, that you were a bad husband. In my mind, I believed that if you were bad for me, then I didn't need to feel guilty for cheating. How wrong I was. I felt guilty every time I touched one of these men. I thought that if I played the role of the victim, that you were cruel or indifferent, then my infidelity would be justified. These were absolutely idiotic thoughts, but that's what I thought then. When I showed you the finger, it was a sign that you are not important, but the one who was with me is important. It was a complete lie, and of course it ended up hitting me hard in the head. I never really thought that way. I didn't mean to tell you to go to hell. It was just a show to hide my guilt. Forgive me for this. I'm really sorry that I did this, and I'm even more sorry that you saw it. I sincerely apologize. I watched Marty's face as he digested my explanation. Every word I said was the pure truth. It was really just a game to ease my guilt. I didn't want to humiliate him. At that moment, I thought it was a small gesture. I couldn't have been more wrong in my judgment then. Okay, I see what you're saying, Marty replied. You did it to ease your guilt. I can understand that. Cheryl, I trust that you are being honest with me right now. Honestly, this gesture hurt me more than anything else. The sex and lies were terrible, but it was this small act of disrespect that tore me apart. I think this was the last straw that made it impossible for me to move on. I still have memories of you doing it, and it still hurts terribly. Is that why you didn't want to talk to me? Because I didn't answer this question. Well, yes, but that's only part of it. I think I used that as an excuse not to talk to you. I was so angry that I didn't want to do or say anything that would hurt us both further, and I definitely didn't want to go through that pain again. It took my friends a long time for me to even start talking about you. Seeing you today is pretty hard. We paused and took a sip of water to collect our thoughts. Okay, Cheryl, as you told me about your life over the past year, now it's my turn. When I hit send on my computer and sent everyone those videos of you with other men, I was furious, more furious than I've ever been in my life. I was so angry that I could kill someone, and that someone could be you. Mandy said I looked calm on the outside, but inside I was a volcano. I wanted to hurt you. Damn it, I wanted to hurt everyone. I knew I would destroy everything you had built in your career, but I didn't care. Taking everything you loved from you was my best revenge. And yes, I included myself in this. I just wanted you to suffer the same way I suffered. And emailing your boss's wives was my revenge on those people who took something important from me. They took my wife and helped destroy my marriage. Oh, I blamed you for this, but I considered them guilty too. I took revenge on everyone, and everyone paid for it, including me. Over the next few months, I received threatening calls and letters, some from Enterprise employees, others from friends of your lovers. I tried to apologize to these men's wives, but they were too hurt to listen. One of them even spat in my face. However, all four wives took copies of the video for their divorce cases. I lived with my father for a couple of months, trying to come to my senses. He was generous, gave me a lot of good advice, and helped me calm down and see things as they are. After a few weeks, I noticed the same tension in his eyes that I had. I stopped talking to him and started thinking on my own. After some time, I returned home, but by that time you had been gone for a long time. I didn't try to find you or call you. I was glad that you left, although there was a huge emptiness in my soul. I think I cried for 3 days straight before my friends came and gave me some kind of intervention. It took the whole weekend, but by the end of the second day I was laughing again. After that, Mandy and Adriana were like mothers to me. They told me what to do, when to do it, and when to finish. I needed this. Ian stayed with me day and night, making sure I was eating well, getting enough exercise, and making sure things didn't go wrong at work. Even Jackie came by from time to time. She kept trying to persuade me to get a tattoo, but I refused. She later said that she knew I wouldn't do it. She was just trying to get me out of my comfort zone of suffering and back into reality. I got too caught up in my grief. One weekend, Red came over with a bunch of action movies on DVD, pizza, and beer, and we had a man's weekend that lasted 2 days. Ian got really mad at me for leaving empty pizza boxes and beer cans all over the living room and not showering all weekend. Overall, it was quite cathartic. I wallowed in self-pity for about 3 months before I woke up one day and started living again. The first thing I did was put our apartment up for sale. You already signed the divorce papers, so there was no reason for me to stay there. Too many memories. It took a few months to sell. The real estate market was slow, but by the time it sold, I was already living here. As far as I know, our old apartment was bought by a nice couple of men. Either way, moving here was a new beginning. It was a break from the past, and that was what I needed most. When I received notice that our divorce was final, I began to fall into the abyss again. Ian stayed with me until I found myself again. Since then, I've been working harder than ever before, spending time working on my little bungalow and spending as much time as possible with friends. They were my support. I don't know if I could have survived all this without them. Oh, I don't know if I should say this, but my video of you appeared on an amateur site about a month after I sent it out to everyone. Red found it, but I didn't ask how he did it. I swear I didn't put it out there myself, and I'm sorry it ended up on the internet. I don't know what you can do about it, but I'll give you the link anyway. Marty paused, as if gathering his thoughts for his final words. I put the money from the sale of our house in the bank, and your half is just over $22,000. I'll write you a check this evening. I'm sorry I didn't send it sooner, but I just didn't want to run into you. It was cowardly of me, I understand. Now about what you asked about before dinner. I think I can answer that now. I thought about this for a long time. You asked me to forgive you. Cheryl, I forgive you. I forgive you, but only for selfish reasons. I can't carry this hatred for you anymore, so by forgiving I get rid of these feelings. Cheryl, I don't hate you anymore, but I don't like it either. Yes, I can forgive you, but I can't forget what you did. Believe it or not, those few times I watched the video of you and your lovers ruined every good memory we ever had. Our hopes and dreams are gone. It's all gone, Cheryl. All the good memories, all the good feelings, all the plans we made together are gone. And the hostility I felt towards you is also gone. Now I am a blank slate learning to trust, love, and believe again. So I think you see where I'm going with this. Cheryl, I no longer have feelings for you. Love is gone. I once loved you more than anything in the world, but now. Someday there will be a Mrs. Marty Hughes, but it won't be you. I can't look at you without remembering how you had sex with them. And I can't look at you without remembering how you gave me the middle finger. I'm sorry if this ruins your hopes for reconciliation, but I can't go back in time. This part of my life is too painful. I'm moving on, but without you. I was devastated. I just sat there and cried. My life was over. I will never be with the man I love again. Oh God, why am I doing all this? I repeated quietly over and over again. Marty got up, brought me a box of tissues, and left me alone. When I looked up a few minutes later, I saw him in the kitchen, surrounded by friends. A young Asian woman leaned her head against his shoulder. Now I understood what Mandy and Adriana meant when they said he had moved on. I was part of his past, and this young woman is his future. I sat and cried until the light of day began to fade. I cleaned myself up enough to walk out through the kitchen and into the bathroom. I washed my face again, touched up my makeup, and did my best to look manly. When I came out, everyone was standing in the living room talking to Marty. When he saw me, he handed me an envelope. Here is your share of the sale of the house, and on the back there is a link to the video. It just ended like that. My hopes that he would forgive me and bring me back disappeared. Along with them, the last piece of my dignity disappeared. I had to start life from scratch, but without him. Marty walked with me outside to the car. I took his hand for the last time, quietly said goodbye and kissed him on the cheek, the man I loved and at the same time destroyed. I opened the car door and paused for a moment, wondering if I would have the courage to look back one last time. I plucked up my courage and turned my head. What I saw completely broke my heart. Marty stood on the sidewalk with his arm around a young Asian woman's waist and her arm around his waist. Behind them stood all his friends, Mandy, Adriana, a tall, red-haired man, and a scary girl with piercings. They all stood in a row with their arms extended forward with their middle fingers raised up. The message was clear: go to hell. Now I completely understood Marty's pain. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.